Emily had always been the quiet one. In a school filled with chatter and laughter, she stood on the outskirts, her world spinning both figuratively and literally. Ever since she was diagnosed with vertigo, life had become a balancing act, and not just physically. The bouts of dizziness came at the most unexpected times. While walking down the hall, during a class presentation, even while sitting in the cafeteria, she hated how it made her look weak. More than that, she hated herself for it. To cope, Emily withdrew, wearing oversized hoodies and hats to hide herself. She walked with her head down, careful not to draw attention. She became an expert at disappearing into the background, making sure no one noticed the moments she would need to steady herself against a locker, or sit down when the world started tilting too much. And it worked for a while, until he came along. James was the new kid, tall with messy black hair and eyes that always seemed to be laughing. He was the kind of boy that everyone noticed, and it was clear from the start that he enjoyed the attention. He was confident, charismatic, and in Emily's eyes, everything she was not. Which is why it confused her when, during a particularly bad episode of Vertigo one afternoon, he noticed her. She was sitting by herself under a tree, eyes shut tightly as she waited for the spinning to stop. She didn't hear him approach, but suddenly, there he was, standing in front of her, casting a shadow. "You okay?" he asked, his voice gentle. But there was a trace of curiosity that made her feel self-conscious. Emily tried to wave him off. "I'm fine. Just leave me alone." But he didn't leave. Instead, James sat down beside her. She tensed, unsure why he was still there. "You don't look fine," he said, glancing at her pale face. I said, "I'm fine." Her tone was harsher than she intended, but she hoped it would make him go away. The last thing she needed was for someone like him to see her like this. James was silent for a moment, and then said something that caught her off guard. "Why do you hide yourself?" Emily blinked, turning to him. "What?" "I've seen you," he continued, looking directly at her. "You're always trying to disappear, like you don't want anyone to notice you." "Why?" Her face flushed with embarrassment. She hated this, hated that someone was finally paying attention, and it had to be him. "You wouldn't understand." "Try me." Emily bit her lip, staring at the ground. She didn't owe him an explanation. He was just some boy. Yet, for reasons she couldn't explain, the words spilled out. "I have vertigo. It's unpredictable. Makes me dizzy, weak. I fall sometimes. It's embarrassing." James's eyes softened as he listened, but when he spoke, his words weren't filled with pity. Instead, they were laced with something more pointed. "So what? You're embarrassed because of something you can't control?" Emily glared at him. "It's not that simple. People stare. They whisper. I don't want to be that girl who's always falling or feigning. It's easier if I just hide." James tilted his head, studying her for a moment before speaking. "You know, you keep saying you're worried about what other people think, but it sounds like you're the one who hasn't accepted it." Emily blinked, caught off guard by his words. "What are you talking about?" "You haven't accepted yourself," he said plainly. "How can you expect society or anyone else to accept you when you haven't even done that?" His words hit harder than Emily expected. She wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, but deep down, she knew he was right. All this time, she had been hiding from herself as much as from others. She had let her condition define her and dictate her worth. And in doing so, she had built walls not just around her, but inside her. "You think it's that easy?" she muttered, her voice shaky. "No," James said softly. "I think it's hard as hell. But I also think you're stronger than you give yourself credit for." Emily glanced at him, and for the first time, she saw something in his eyes she hadn't noticed before. Respect. He didn't pity her. He wasn't here to fix her or make her feel better. He was simply telling her the truth. For the first time in a long time, Emily allowed herself to consider the possibility that maybe, just maybe, she didn't need to hide anymore. Maybe she could face the world, dizziness and all, without shame. I don't know if I can, she whispered. James smiled gently. You can. You've just got to take that first step. Emily took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words sink in. Maybe he was right. Maybe it was time to stop hiding, to stop letting her condition define her. And maybe, with people like James around, she didn't have to face it alone. As the dizziness faded, Emily stood up slowly. She wobbled slightly, but this time she didn't feel ashamed. James stood up beside her, offering no help unless she asked for it, but just being there. Emily smiled faintly. Thanks. Anytime, he said, grinning. Besides, I like the idea of people seeing you. For the first time in a long while, Emily didn't mind the thought of being seen. Thanks for watching our video. Do subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to like, comment, and share.